Okay, so we're going to get started with the program. One last thing too, if you're looking to play golf today, there is an informal tournament that was set up. I don't see Howard here. He's got a couple foursomes, but Howard Schreiber would be the gentleman you want to reach out to if you want to try to get a round of golf in this afternoon. All right, so with that, if I can have everybody's attention here, we're going to get started. It's my pleasure to bring up AFI's current chairman, John Sessler, and he's going to get us started with today's program. Thank you, John.
Good morning. Thanks, Bob. Ladies and gentlemen, the annual convention of the Association of Food Industries is now in session. I'd like to welcome everyone to Fort Lauderdale and thank the convention committee for its work on this year's convention program. The speakers that we've arranged all have messages of importance to the future of our businesses. It's great to be together in person again, but I'd also like to welcome those participating remotely. Sponsors help us meet our convention bills and keep the registration as low as possible. All sponsors are listed in the convention program and have ribbons on their name badges. Thank you to the companies listed on the slide for your convention sponsorships. Could the sponsors please stand so we can express our appreciation with a round of applause? Most of you participated in the Importer Resource Gallery yesterday, and I know we all learned a lot and enjoyed the exposure to our friends from abroad, including Poland, Portugal, India, Greece, and the Ivory Coast. Welcome to all of you. We're sincerely glad you're here with us. Lastly, I'd like to thank Seton International Foods for sponsoring last night's welcoming reception. I'd also like to take a moment to welcome our first-time attendees. It's great to have you with us. You'll quickly see why many of us have been attending the AFI convention year after year. Some of you might have noticed something different in the signage and the convention materials. After many years, we're unveiling a new AFI logo during the convention. A special thanks to Phil Meldrum and his team at Food Match for their help in designing this logo. We think reflects a more contemporary organization with a global focus for our US importers and the trade. Another change you'll see, in an effort to use less paper, we've created this QR code. Please scan the camera on your phone now, and you'll be taken to the convention website featuring all the schedule and activity details, as well as an attendee list and a restaurant guide. For those who prefer them, we still have copies on paper. Before we move to the first education session, I want to remind you that everyone, later today, there'll be a free excursion to Port Everglades. It's 3 miles away, and participants will self-transport there. Port officials will provide an overview at 2:30 in the auditorium, followed by a peek above the facilities. If you can attend and didn't sign up, please see Aaron Jordan this morning. If you don't have a car, we're looking to arrange carpools among those to the port to help those that need it. I'd like to turn things back over to AFI President Bob Bauer, who will introduce the participants in this morning's panel discussion and supply chain issues. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, John. Obviously, hot topic right now, unfortunately, but we're pleased to continue AFI's efforts in keeping as up to date as possible on what's going on with the supply chain issues. I've heard in one way, shape, or form each of these speakers before, so I know we're in for a good treat. We had some intros, short ones written, but I think it'll be better. I'm going to have them introduce themselves a little bit. They're going to each give a quick rundown to give you an idea of where their expertise is, and then we're just going to open it up for questions, both from in the room and online. So on our panel, we have Bill Rooney, who's the Vice President, Strategic Development, Logistics, and Supply Chain for Kuhn and Nagel. Jennifer Diaz, Diaz Trade Law. Robert Barcelo, Senior Manager, Business Development at Port Everglades, and Robert Reist, VP of North American Land Transportation for Crowley Logistics. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to Bill, and he's going to kick things off. Okay, I wonder why that's showing there. If you hit advance, it's not moving. I can advance it on here if you'd like, but it's not showing on the screen. Okay, let's see. Yeah, all right, bear with us a little bit. Oh, you know what? This may be related to the Zoom. Yeah, it is. Bear with us just a second, folks. I'm going to stop sharing for now. Can you go back to the beginning? Because I can just do it there. That's yeah, but it's not showing up on there for some reason. You might have to go to the. Screen. Was it working before? Yes. Yeah, it worked for 2 tests. Before you did the Zoom, though, right? No, we did a couple Zoom practices. Aaron. Aaron. Bill? Bill? There we go. Okay. That'll help. Let me do a sound check. Tonight, go without the mic. Okay, here's the virtual. Virtual. I'm not using the mic. Now the virtual folks can hear. Okay, got it. Virtual folks. Okay, thanks everybody, and sorry for the bit of a mix-up there in the technology. The task I was given was to take 5 minutes to explain something I could probably take 5 hours on, but I'm going to try to give you some of the basics and then leave it all to Q&A after that. But this is all about basically the mayhem we're involved in right now, what caused it, that sort of thing. Try to run through it about a minute per slide. And the first slide depicts U.S. consumer spending. And at the beginning of COVID, and you can see and this is basically the entire story, almost about what happened, what you're all experiencing now. If you remember, COVID hit, consumer spending collapsed. The savings rate in the US went from 7% to 33%. The world was coming to an end. Nobody was spending anything, hunkering down. Overnight, spending rebounded, but with a very, very significant change. Pre-COVID, the spending patterns, the US has $15–16 trillion of consumer spending, and it was generally spent 70-30 services products. Overnight, that 70-30 switched to about 66-34, 33-34. The 33-34 amounts over a year is about $500 billion of stuff. All that stuff requires transportation, and much of it comes from outside the US. But basically, 99%, for example, of the shoes worn in this room were made outside the United States. Probably almost all the clothing, all this furniture, a lot of it's coming from overseas. So that's what happened was it rebounded. Everybody started buying 3 couches, 2 refrigerators, a bunch of hand tools, gym equipment, home office equipment. And what happened was it overwhelmed what had been sufficient assets in the networks
to carry all this cargo. It basically overwhelmed everything. That's what happened. Let's see. There we go. And this is a depiction of what happened at LA Long. Who here ships in or out of LA or Long Beach? Okay. You've seen these pictures. This is the number of ships waiting for a berth in LA Long Beach. LA Long Beach has, depending on the count, 12 or 13 facilities, 32, 33 berths. And typically in normal times, that number of ships waiting should be 0. It got as high as 109 on January 9th of this year. This is a reflection of everything being overwhelmed. And it wasn't just the ships. It was the facilities, the terminals, the rail network, trucking, chassis, everything got hammered. And it wasn't the fact that there were not enough assets. There was just too much cargo in too short a period of time to handle the surge. And this is what I'm sure you've seen. This is what happened to schedule reliability. This is a chart that shows there are about 6,000 container ships in the world and about 24 million TEUs. TEU is a 20-foot equivalent. And in normal times, reliability is 70 to 80%. You know, that's performance that would probably get everybody in this room fired if those were your personal KPIs, right? But over many, many, many years, shippers and carriers have had this unwritten relationship where shippers told carriers 2 things for 50 years. First thing they told them is your service sucks. The second thing they told them is, but we love the rates. All right, so that's why we ended up with I was on the carrier side for 32 years. I was involved in this. But what happened in COVID, it's down to 30 or 35%. In the Trans-Pacific, it was down to 10% on time. So 30% on time is as good as 0 on time because you can't plan anything when 70% of your boats are not on time. Another reflection. And maybe the most important thing, this is what happened to rates. Rates went up. This is global. This is 8 very large trades in the world: Trans-Pacific, Transatlantic, Asia, Europe, Asia Med. And rates are now, well, now they're 4 times, but they reached a peak of 5 times what they were prior to COVID. All right. I mean, that's just astounding. And you can see the carrier financial results reflect that. Now, this is obviously very, very bad news for anybody who's shipping cargo. The thing people forget, though, is that again, and I'm not exaggerating, for 50 years, the rates were, everybody in this room was getting a 6 to 7% discount on the assets employed. The cost of capital in that business prior to the COVID was about 10%, weighted average debt equity, right? And they were earning consistently year in, year out, 3 or 4%. That 6, 7% discount was being subsidized by governments and other people. People forget they were getting a discount for 50 years of 6%. And it, you know, that wasn't your problem. That was the carriers making, the governments that owned them making big mistakes, overbuilding, et cetera. But the fact remains is you were getting assets that cost 10%. You were getting them at 3 or 4%. Now you're dealing with operating margins on the carrier side of north of 50%, which is hedge fund, you know, tech company territory. Okay, things are getting better. This is a measure of disruption. Just look at the lines. The disruption is going up. The top line is global disruption. I don't need to get into how it's calculated. It's pretty straightforward, pretty basic. It's basically a summation of all the ships waiting at major ports, adding up all their TEUs. So it was getting worse, worse, worse. It's been getting better, but what's happening? It's getting worse again. That's going to be part of the forecast we'll talk about later. Things are going to get worse before they get better. They will get better, but they're going to get worse before they get better. Oh, this is the last slide. This is part of the forecast. If you're reading the Wall Street Journal, the FT, or those kind of publications, you're seeing more of these kinds of things where companies like Mattress Outfits, Sealy, people like that, Restoration Hardware, Hasbro Toys are all putting out to their financial analyst shareholders that their demand is down, is heading down. Now that's the big question here, and I'm going to end up with that. What's going to happen? The only solution, you hear politicians all the time saying, one politician pointing at the other saying, you're the problem with supply chain. And another one saying, I'm going to solve it for you. Both are full of BS, right? They had nothing to do with it. They can't fix it. All they can do is make it worse. All right, because they had nothing to do with it in the first place. So So don't put your hopes on any political figure trying to help things, because they won't. Not that they're bad people. They're just responding to what has become an issue that is, shows up on Saturday Night Live, shows up in presidential briefings, shows up in the nightly news. That's what they're reacting to. So big question is, what's going to happen to demand? The solution ultimately for this is not necessarily more assets. It's the volumes of cargo getting back to normal, which will happen, but it's not going to happen in the next couple of months. I think things will get better by the end of the year, but by better, I mean better relative to the horrible stuff we saw at the peak of COVID problems. Congestion will get better, rates will get better, but certainly rates are never going to go back to what they were pre-COVID. A good figure is probably double in the long run. They're a lot more than that now. So, but congestion will get somewhat better, but not also back to pre-COVID levels. So I'll leave it at that, and we can maybe have Q&A a little later, but I'll end it right there. Are we going to do Q&A now, or are you going to? At the end, okay. So we'll hold it. Yeah. Okay.
Hey, everyone. Can you hear me? Is it working? Yeah? Not really? Can I switch mics? Working? I hear yes and no. Just in case. I'll trade you. Better? Oh, a lot better. All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Jen Diaz. I'm the president of Diaz Trade Law. I'm a board certified international attorney and just deal with import-export law. So our clients are food importers, manufacturers, and so on. So as we hear the bad news about what happens logistically, unfortunately, the US federal government agencies, they didn't really have a lot of sympathy via COVID, and they still don't. So compliance is still at the forefront. If it ever was before, imagine you're waiting for your poor container that's sitting in the middle of the ocean for God knows how long, and your goods finally arrive and they're not compliant. And US FDA and US Customs, they don't care that you just spent 10 times the amount of money on that freaking container. There's no love for you at all in any way, shape, or form. So US Customs processes, well, I'll tell you the figure from fiscal year 2021. 36.9 million entries. That's a lot for a government agency. The value of those was $2.8 trillion during fiscal year 2021, and they collected $85.5 billion in revenue, and that's in duties. They're the second largest revenue producing agency in the United States after the IRS, okay? So US Customs just cares about their money, and US Food and Drug Administration only cares about compliance. So now you have that on the side. And I'm curious because the USMCA stats are pretty amazing. Out of those, more than $543 billion. So out of our 2.8 trillion, 543 billion of US imported products claimed USMCA. I'm curious for those in the room, who has Canada or Mexico imports? Anyone? A couple. It's interesting. You guys don't follow the stats, but when it comes to USMCA, US Customs and Border Protection would be the one enforcing that eligibility. So the fun part for you for the USMCA claimants is, do you always have your certificates of origin? Do you always have your production proof to ensure that your goods are compliant? Because US Customs similarly is always on the lookout and checking. When it comes to FDA statistics, what we've seen is out of 14 million import lines in fiscal year 2021, 5,000 of those were refused. So what does that mean? It means your goods aren't in compliance when they physically arrive in the US, and FDA sends you this notice of FDA action. And if you don't reply to that favorably and don't maybe recondition your goods if your labels aren't compliant. So what are the popular things that we see? You don't have an appropriate registration with the FDA. So even for a show like this, if you're bringing samples, you have to have a food facility that's registered with the FDA pursuant to the Bioterrorism Act. One of the top mistakes we see is that facilities aren't in fact registered. And if you're an overseas facility outside of the US, you need a US agent. That's a service itself that we also perform. my company, Diaz Trade Consulting. So if anybody wants to talk about registrations, because every 2 years in the even number years, which is this year, you have to redo your registration. So what FDA is seeing, your companies aren't fixing their registration. You go out of business, you have a different address, you have a different point of contact, and you're not actually keeping your registration up to date. That's a big issue that companies are now getting faced with warning letters for. So we're seeing more and more enforcement on that side. So in addition to the recalls, human foods, and that they accounted for 46% of FDA refusals in 2021. That's a lot. And out of those human foods, we had, out of the compliance categories, what was interesting in the compliance issues by country, US produced foods had the worst compliance actions, interestingly enough, which is crazy. And then the top countries for refused lines, Mexico, India, and China are top 3, and Canada was number 4. So if anyone's dealing with Mexico, India, China, and Canada, these were the top countries for refused line items. And for compliance actions by country, we wind up having more compliance actions with US entities as well, which is also scary. Bottom line is I've got a top 10 tips when you're importing food. I've got a QR code in the lobbies. There are a lot of things to think about, whether it's your registration, your food labeling, complying with Food and Drug Administration's Food Safety Modernization Act, FSMA, having your FSVP plan. How many of you in the room are importers versus manufacturers? A few of you. And if you keep those hands up, how many of you have your FSVP plans in gear and you are proud of that FSVP plan? Perfect. And I hope you are. If you don't know what an FSVP plan is, we need to talk, because FDA is coming for you. They've inspected companies, and over 130 plus companies have received warning letters for not having appropriate FSVP plans in place. Bottom line is, with logistics not being a smooth sailing operation and us hearing that more disruption is to come, now is not the time to not think about compliance. Now is even more so the time to think about compliance and ensure that your food products are perfect when they enter the US, because as you can see from some of these stats, the government does not have sympathy for what you are going through on the logistical front. So having your I's dotted and T's crossed for your particular products to ensure that there is smooth sailing is really significant, and now is the time to get those items across. Thank you.
I'll stand up and walk, and gives me a head start if I got to run out of the room. Good morning, everyone. My name is Robert Barcelo. I'm the Senior Manager for Business Development at Port Everglades, which is a couple of minutes down the road here. Hopefully some of you will join us later on today for a more in-depth port overview and an overview of the facilities at the port. The last couple of years, if there's a positive from my standpoint or my point of view that's come out of this, is supply chain issues have become ubiquitous. Probably in the room here, everyone knows what supply chain, but once you go outside the room and in your jobs, you talk to people in the street, supply chain, and no one knows. People go to a store, they don't know where their merchandise came from. I meet with a family now, had a family dinner Sunday. The first question walking into the room, so Robert, what's going on with the supply chain? Oh, come on now, let's enjoy a meal and leave that behind. I've put together a couple of slides to talk about Port Everglades. Thankfully, to a certain degree, we've not been hit with all of the vessel delays that you've seen or have heard in the news happening in California, New York, Charleston, Savannah. Primary reason for that is we are essentially a Latin American port. 75% of the cargo that moves through the port is Latin America. And there we go. Just a quick snap of what Port Everglades is, or the services that we have. We're a very diversified port. Most ports are container cargo, a little bit of break bulk. Some are container cargo, cruise. Port Everglades is extremely diversified. We do cruising, of course, and hopefully one of these days you'll join us in a cruise out of the port. Thankfully, cruising is back. Cruising is 35% of our revenue stream. So it's when the pandemic hit, suffice to say, It went from 35% to zero. And in a day and age where everything is measured by single digits, once you go beyond 10, you're hurting. So 35% is magnified. Thankfully, cargo is back. It never really went away. We're seeing a lot of growth in break bulk cargo, and that is a direct effect from importers not finding container space in most of the carriers that are out there. And again, in our case is Latin America, but we're seeing some cargo from the picture of the rebar you're seeing there comes from Turkey. We've seen break bulk ships coming in with rice for Costco. They've not been able to find space on container ships, so they've had to turn to break bulk ships. South Florida is very, very big in construction. Of course, you guys are food, but we've seen ships with tiles coming from Turkey, Italy, Peru, automobiles. Most of the automobiles, or a good chunk of the automobiles that come into South Florida come from Mexico, Port of Veracruz. We've got autos coming in to the tune of 72,000 units. That's import and export. And these are brand new autos. If you see a Chevy Blazer in the streets of South Florida, that came in through Port Everglades. If you go to Latin America and you see a Honda CR-V or any of the X line of the BMWs, it went out through Port Everglades to various Latin America ports and the Caribbean as well. Of course, containerized cargo never went away. People stopped going to restaurants, but they didn't stop eating. So for vegetables, perishable cargo in general continued to flow through the port at record levels. Actually, fiscal year 21, we exceeded 1 million TEUs annually, and that's the 8th year in a row that we surpassed 1 million TEUs. And cargo overall for the fiscal year 2020 was up 20%, even during the pandemic. Yachts. I'm sure if you stepped out and seen a lot of pleasure cruise boats around, yachts, we do quite a bit of them to the tune of over 45,000 units exported through here. Fort Lauderdale is very big in anything having to do with yachts. And perishable cargo. We handled fiscal year 21. We handled over 157,000 TEUs of perishable cargo. If you walk into a Publix or a Sedano's or any supermarket here, most of the veggies or bananas, pineapples, everything you'll see there came in through Port Everglades. That makes us the #1 port in Florida for handling perishable cargo, import and export as well. Quick snap of the countries that represent our bulk trade partners, just speaking to that reality that we are a LATAM port. Actually, 13%, approximately 13% of US trade with Latin America flows through Port Everglades. And again, speaking about the perishable cargo, our leadership position in Florida and how some of the other, under the right, how some of the other ports in the US fare as far as handling perishables. Don't blow pictures. Aaron's got the presentation. You can feel free to pass it out. We always have pictures of our kids on the phone. Those are three, our brand new kids right there. 3 cranes that we ordered from ZPMC. Wow, those are the old cranes you used to handle back in the day down there. Yeah. We got these about 6 months ago. They're fully operational. And we've got 3 more coming. If ZPMC can make them fast enough, we've heard everything's on track. Our brand new, well, not so brand new, our foreign trade zone. Broward County is home to over 17 zone sites. The main one is at the port, but there's 15 ZUP zone sites all throughout the county. If you guys aren't familiar with FTZ, I'm sure Jen can fill you in on the benefits of if you're importing products, running it through an FTZ. And if Jen can talk you into it, Jen, bring them to me. Our on-rail facility. Florida East Coast Railway, which runs up and down the eastern seaboard of Florida, has a terminal at the port. There's a train that leaves every night towards Jacksonville. It's in Jacksonville the following morning. They connect with Class 1 railroads, and you have access to all the United States, both import and export. And cruising is finally back. That's a picture of the Edge that came in. She's home ported at Port Everglades. We are the third largest cruise port in the world. We average 3.9 million passengers a year. Why is that important to you? Everything that gets consumed on those ships gets loaded at the ports. Food items, liquor, anything, and I mean literally everything that gets consumed on those ships gets loaded at home port. And we got several ships, 32 ships will sail from the port this season. That's 32 separate brands. And that's a huge opportunity for this room as far as getting your product to be consumed on those ships. And not only on the ships, don't have statistics to back the statement up, but almost 80% of foods that are tried on cruise ships, people go back home and they want to keep having more of it because it reminds them of the good time they had on a ship. So if you can get your products on those ships, why are you looking at me so intently? You're scaring me. What did I say? But yeah, seriously, that's a heck of an opportunity for this room to get your products on those ships and get them consumed. And I'm an avid cruiser. I'm good for 1 or 2 cruises a year. It's my favorite vacation. As much traveling as I do, there's nothing like going on a ship, turning off the cell phone, putting it in the safe, and chillax. And that's all she wrote, fellows. Any questions? I'm here all day. Well, not all day.
Hi, how are you? No, I'm good. My name is Bob Wiest. I manage the logistics sector for Crowley Maritime or Crowley Logistics. Funny thing is, I'm sitting here looking at the Port Everglades infrastructure, and I was here 15 years ago, and we had a dirt lot and 3 cranes. So it's come a long way, and we had 32 ships back then. So much different. So my job is handling your freight when it hits the U.S. So I manage transportation for our company, for other steamship lines, for our customers throughout North America. And Bill talked a little bit about port congestion. We're looking at the past 5 years. You had trucking rates 5 years ago hit an all-time high and never seemed like they were going to come down. And all of a sudden the bottom dropped out, and truckers were readily available. And then we went into COVID, and everybody was scrambling, wondering how we were going to keep that logistics infrastructure or supply chain moving. And there was a lot of determination, and there were a lot of people working really hard to try and keep things moving. And then all of a sudden, there were no inventories. The ports opened up, ships opened up, and it was complete chaos. And as Bill had mentioned, there were over 110 ships off the coast in Long Beach. I have my pictures of that. And they started migrating to the East Coast. And so then you had ships sitting off the coast of Savannah. You have ships sitting off the port in Charleston. Customers, you've got your boxes tied up on the ships. Then you have your boxes tied up on the ports. You're getting hit with detention and demurrage charges to the point where people would pay almost anything to get their boxes off of the ports. So, we do the same thing. The unique thing about Crowley is that we have a liner division, which I was a part of. In the past 14 years, I've been part of the logistics division. So my job is, how do I keep that freight moving? And As we've seen in 5 years, there are going to be more and more disruptions to the supply chain. And, how do we counter that? How do we keep everything moving? So for us, it's maintaining a diversified service offering. So I need to make sure that I can scale up and scale down at any given time. I have assets, or I have trucks that can keep your freight moving during slow times. Suppliers only want to deal with assets. I have third-party providers that can get your drayage providers that can get your freight off of the ports. I have strong rail connections to make sure that there's room for you on the ICTS, which is the rail terminals on the ports. I have warehouses that can cross-dock your cargo. And then I have a strong over-the-road division so that we can get your freight to its final destination. Yeah, the other key that we've seen that's really changed. So when I was talking about the dirt port and the 3 cranes that we had, we actually stowed our ships with stickers and wax. And then we moved into some very basic technology. But today in the supply chain, technology is everything. And I would not be able to keep things moving without technology. The one thing we've learned, whether you're in SAP or you're in Oracle or you're in Blue Yonder or JDA, there is no system out there that does everything well. They all do something well, but not everything. So the key here is how do you design and develop your systems and your teams so that in the past you were picking up the phone, you were calling truckers, you were calling your providers, and then everybody was tracking and tracing that cargo until it hit final destination. So today, that's very reactive. How do you take that entire team, your technology, your infrastructure, and move it upstream? So now it's about solution design, network design, building out that network, building out your model. So all the cargo that I move now moves within a model. So within that model, you have several different levers. And if you're hitting the port of Long Beach and all of a sudden Long Beach is backed up and your cargo is going to be moving through the port of Savannah or Charleston or Port Hueneme or up in Oakland, how do I move that lever to see how that affects downstream your entire supply chain? If there are other disruptions, if you're looking at your network and where your warehouse and your distribution centers are, how does each port affect that? Your cargo that's moving, is it better to move that cargo direct containerized to its final destination? Is it better to move to a cross-dock facility? Is it better to build out milk runs or run it LTL to get to your final destination? How do you handle DC bypasses? So taking that model as it exists, moving it into a procurement module, going out and procuring that power from your end, and then automating that so that instead of you calling up, picking up the phone, checking, running down the road, it's flowing directly to whoever you've already procured. That could be your primaries, your secondaries, your waterfalls. And then once it starts moving, once you're executing in that operational model, how is it moving? How are you getting your updates? So as a customer, you probably want dashboards that show the KPIs that are important to your business, your event updates. You may want GPS tracking so that you can see it moving, where it's moving, when it's going to arrive, how you can plan the arrivals and the non-arrivals. And you probably want to manage that down to the PO level. And a lot of companies, when they manage, they're going to manage your shipment at the pallet level. They're going to manage it at the container level. They're going to manage it at the bill of lading level. You're looking at it at the PO level. So that PO level could be a box, it could be a pallet, it could be a container, it could be several hundred containers, but that's what's important. That's how you purchase your goods and how it's being sold to your customers. So to me, it's having a diversified portfolio, having a good model, it's having visibility, and then the third thing is connectivity. So again, we talked about there's not one system out there that does everything well. So if you're an SAP or you're an Oracle managing your business and you're connecting with my TMS or transportation management system, and I need to connect with your WMS or your warehouse management system, and you're connecting with your airline, you're connecting with the rail providers for event updates, you're connecting with a trucker who may have a cell phone that he's reporting, may have an ELD or electronic log that's required in their trucks, or through their TMS system. So how do you keep all that information moving? How do you package it so that you understand what's moving? How do you see that your KPIs and understand the downstream effects? So putting all that together and then keeping drivers in trucks, is probably the last thing. So for us, there's a trucker shortage. There's not a trucker shortage. So recently, trucking rates hit an all-time high, and you saw more people investing in trucks. There was a 18-month back off for equipment, ordering new equipment and having it built. You were finding drivers coming out of the construction jobs and going back into trucks because they can make money, they can earn a living for their families. And they also had a choice of where they wanted to go and what they wanted to do. So I want a job that pays well, and I want to be home every night. I do not want to be out on the road. And I don't want to deal with all that stuff you're dealing with at the port. I don't want to go to the port. So, how do you set up relays for your drivers? How do you pay them an adequate wage? And you're competing with companies like Amazon, who are not making their money on the trucking segment of their logistics. They're making money on the sale of the product. So if the going rate in Savannah is $22 a truck, Amazon could come in and pay everybody $30 a truck, and they'll wipe out the entire trucking market. But that's not where they're making their money. So, my job, and I guess the questions I'd be fielding is, how do we keep that freight moving? How do we answer your questions so that when you're in a U.S. port, your freight is moving, it's getting to its final destination, it's getting there on time, you're being updated with the information that you need. You have dashboards that allow you to enter information, receive information, see your KPIs. So yeah, a lot there, but that's the fun part of the business. Earlier in my career, when I ran terminals and I was invested in major projects for Crowley, so we did all the hurricane recovery efforts for Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico, chartered 14 vessels. We leased every container from Chicago down to Miami, loaded them, worked for FEMA, delivered the water, delivered to each municipality in Puerto Rico. So yes, the cargo did get there. We had Ebola recovery efforts. So we supported the U.S. Army, chartered ships, set up maritime operations in Liberia, and serviced Liberia and Sierra Leone, and Hurricane Katrina efforts, Syria chemical weapons disposal. They were all fun projects, but the most challenging part of my career is now trying to get your freight to its final destination with the market disruptions that we're seeing now that are the most significant that I've ever seen in my lifetime. And I've been with Crowley for 34 years. So yeah, quite a bit. Thank you.
Okay, so now, second to pick it up. Hopefully the mic will turn on shortly. Anybody have any questions?
Yeah, I just have a question about ocean freight. So I understand that time is money. And I know that a lot of the California freight never got, they had a problem getting containers. They had a problem getting the containers because this is in California for export, because the lines were they didn't want to have to load them. So as soon as they came into the West Coast, they unloaded the containers, and instead of sending it to exporters, they shipped the containers empty to China, where they were getting the highest freight. So time is something that's very important, and they forego the small revenue to ship containers full. But what I don't understand is, first of all, why the routing keeps changing on shipments coming from wherever, South America, China, Vietnam, what have you. And why is it that sometimes containers sit at a transshipment port for as much as 2 months? I don't understand that. If time is the essence and containers cost money and they're short on containers and everything, why is product sitting for months on end sometimes at ports, transshipment ports?
Take that one.
I'll answer it, whatever. First of all, the reason there are export issues, a couple of things is importers are paying 10 times as much as exporters to move a box with the same containers, same assets, everything else. So that has incented the carriers to want to get a box as quickly as they can back to Asia, back to Europe, to pick up a very high paying box versus an export box. I mean, it's unfortunate. That's just a fact of life. Export rates out of the US have always been much lower since there's built-in overcapacity on exports. And the reason things sit is, if you think back to the slides I was showing, everything, when I say everything, I mean all of the associated assets, not just the ships, the marine facilities, containers, chassis, everything is dislocated in the wrong place. There's too much stuff in this place versus that place. And that's basically why things end up waiting. And for example, in a transshipment port, if you've got ships, for example, that are waiting, if your ship is coming into LA, that ship is going to wait probably 1 to 4 weeks for a berth. And this network pre-COVID ran fairly well. You only had to wait a maximum of 1 week in a transshipment port, because the next ship would always come through on a weekly basis. Well, that isn't happening because the ships are never on time, right? They're on time in certain trades 10% of the time. So the fact that by the way, you're not alone. Many shippers have experienced the same thing with cargo getting lost. By the way, it also gets lost in a facility. It's not boat related. It's the fact that when marine terminals get above 85% utilization, they slow down markedly. And it's like molasses in February and not in Fort Lauderdale in New Jersey, right? So there's many reasons, but a lot of the problems you're experiencing are related to the fact that the global network of assets and other processes that move cargo has been totally congested, and it's led to the kind of things you've experienced with cargo getting trapped in a transload port for extended periods. And in fact, the same thing happens at ramps around Chicago, where a box will be stuck there for 45 days, 60 days. So, but not to give it too simplistic an answer, but it's related globally to this gigantic surge in cargo that overwhelmed the networks and the assets. If you're an exporter, though, you're experiencing additional problems with getting a hold of it. And by the way, the carriers have disincented and continue to disincent boxes moving inland. They raise the rail ramp rates to get to Chicago, Memphis, Atlanta, Dallas, because they want the box to turn on the West Coast, turn on the East Coast to get back to Asia or Europe. That limits significantly the number of empty boxes available in the middle of the country. So that's happening as well. So a quick note, I didn't advertise KN too much, but Kuehne+Nagel, 130 years old. We're the biggest sea freight forwarder. We're the biggest air freight forwarder. You name it, we do it. We got 1,400 offices around the world, basically everywhere. So that's my advertisement for Kuehne+Nagel.
Hi, Robert. This is for you. So I thank you. Think you've all articulated what we're living today. I'm kind of interested, particularly with what you told us about Crowley. You know, we're part of the reason we're here is kind of what's the future going to look like. So my question for you from Crowley's perspective is, when do you think autonomous driving will alleviate some of the labor issues and driver issues? And how do you think domestic freight will look in 5 years?
So autonomous trucking is coming. When you look down the road, I think the last I saw was 2042 was when you would see a significant change. Before that, so we're investing in autonomous trucking, but we're also investing in container yards and drop stations for autonomous trucks. If you're looking at DOT and public perspective, you know, there's a lot of discussion about having a truck out on the road carrying 42,000 pounds of cargo going down your highway. So what we're seeing now is that not fully autonomous. There are certain networks where there are trials that are occurring today. They had one with a smaller autonomous trucking company actually in Florida last year, small trucking company that developed it. But what you're seeing is robotics. You're seeing driver assist, the same technology that you're seeing in your car, but there'll still be a driver on the road. However, they may be on the road longer. You know, have 14 hours and they can drive for a 10 or 11 hour period with breaks. So I think what's going to happen is you'll take existing drivers, you'll provide them with autonomy. However, there'll still be a truck or a driver within the truck or a driver within two trucks. They do believe that autonomous trucking by 2042 could represent 70% of the long haul within the US. So I think it's, you know, it's coming. There's public perception. There's a tremendous amount of liability associated with it. But yes, we're investing in it. I'm sure Bill is, a lot of our companies, but I think it's in a developmental stage right now.
All right. I needed to get some more steps today, so this is working out pretty well here. Of course, the other mic worked fine when we were testing before.
Thanks, Bob. Question, Bill, you teased us. You said, hey, rates are going up, then they're going to eventually come down. What's that event that happens? And then secondly, just curious on the situation in the California ports, and I don't know if that's a question for you or one of the other panelists, but what you think is going to happen? Are they going to strike, not going to strike?
Pretty familiar with it. Rates, I'll tell you, stay standing. Rates, as I said, they went as much as globally 5 times as what they were prior to COVID. They will definitely come down. In fact, some of them, if you look at trend lines more recently, they are trending down partially because of seasonality, but also partially systemically they're coming down, but they're still 4 times. You know, they were 5, now they're 4. I would tell you, for long-term planning, I tell customers all the time, is beyond next year, you're better off assuming generally your rates are going to be double what they were pre-COVID. Now, that's quite a bit less than what they are now, but I don't think they're ever going back to what they were at prior to COVID. To give you an example, people were paying from Asia to the US West Coast more than $30,000 for 140 to the West Coast. Not a lot of people, but a fair amount of cargo moved north of 30,000 bucks. Pre-COVID, that same box would have moved at $1,600. All right, so that's the kind of difference you're facing, but they will come down. All right, and I think they'll come down later on this year. They'll continue to drop, all based on supply and demand. This is a commodity business, right? Customers generally don't see distinction between, at least on a carrier level, A, B, C, D in the bigger trades, right? They don't see a distinction worth paying for. So supply, if it goes up, will drive rates down. So they will come down. They just won't come back to where they were pre-COVID. As far as the ILWU, just so those who don't know, the union that unloads every single box, they're a labor monopoly on the West Coast. Every single box that's loaded or discharged on the US West Coast is handled by an ILWU member, International Longshore Warehousemen's Union. I was on the board. I went through the negotiations in 2008. Their contract expires on July 1st. They start negotiations on May 12th. It's a bit of a coin toss as to whether there'll be a labor stoppage of some or slowdown. I'm cautiously optimistic that there will be a settlement without a labor action, but primarily because of political pressure. As I mentioned before, supply chain problems are the product, it drives late night comedy, presidential briefings, it's in front of everybody. So at the federal, state, and local level, there's going to be a significant amount of pressure on both sides to reach a settlement prior to any kind of labor action. The key issue is automation. These people make $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 a year. The stevedores that unload and load the ships make that kind of money. They obviously don't want to lose any of those jobs. They want to keep those jobs to pass them on to sons, daughters, friends, family. And it's an existential issue for the terminal operators because there's never going to be another facility built on the US West Coast, ever. The locals hate them. They're noisy, they pollute, everything else. So you have to handle freight in the future, they're going to have to improve productivity. The union doesn't want to improve productivity. So that's the issue. But I think they'll reach a settlement, but largely because of political pressure.
Okay, now the mic is working, I believe. So any questions out here with this mic? Jen, I'll ask you something real quick. Because I know it doesn't pertain to the folks in this room, because these folks are out in front when it comes to following regulations.
These are compliant folks.
That's right. And I'm glad you were talking about FSVP compliance and the like, because almost every company in here is taking a course through me. So that was good to hear.
And that course is A+ rating, right, everyone?
Right. But how about in general, what are you seeing from other importers? Because we're always concerned about the folks not in the associations and don't screw it up for the folks in the association. So what are you seeing there in terms of your thoughts on general importer understanding of FSVP?
They just don't, and they're not doing it, which is so interesting. If you were to poll the average importer of food product in the United States and ask them what FSVP stood for, I would say 70 to 80% would say, what are you talking about? So we need to get more people taking your course. That's first. And unfortunately, when FDA comes knocking, they don't really have any sympathy anymore for those companies that don't have their FSVP plans in gear, because how long has FDA been talking about this? For years now. So they've said, we've made our dog and pony show, we've done our road show, we've talked to everyone about what needs to be done FDA wise to make us happy. And during COVID, they were still doing remote inspections. And now they're getting back to in-person inspections. So be ready for FDA to come to your facility physically and to check on you and to check on your manufacturer as well. So we're seeing overseas inspections starting to be scheduled. We're seeing our FSVP inspections in gear. Our clients have been hit remotely during COVID, and now we're going to see those in-person inspections. And if you have the right prep and the right team in place, they go very smoothly with a happy face. Otherwise, you start seeing these warning letters, and they're not pretty to be publicly shamed by FDA. So we're absolutely seeing more and more of those, and the recalls are going up as well. We're seeing a lot of food recalls and silly things that can be fixed, like food labels are what I would consider the silly things. It's an easy fix. If you go to a great food testing company, I know one in the room, you can have your food label tested and you can get a wonderful nutrition facts panel. They're there's no excuse to not do that in advance of importation besides cost. That's to me where you need to spend money at the beginning, and where a lot of companies say, I'm so concerned about a sale prior to, I'll care about compliance after. But FDA does not work that way. So we're seeing a lot of that on the ground. It's like the cart before the horse, the chicken or the egg. And to me, the compliance aspect should never be an afterthought. But on the ground, we're seeing a lot of companies put it as an afterthought, and it's quite hurtful. We're seeing companies that import food products that don't realize there could be a USDA component as well, and that happens quite often. Like we had somebody with a canned soup, and there was chicken pieces in it, and they didn't have the right permit from their particular country. And I'll tell you how much sympathy USDA had, and it's a big ball of zero. You know, there's no love, no sympathy after the fact if you can't get your permits and or any compliance needed in order at the time of importation. I would say the government agencies are showing no mercy and no love.
I think this is really for Bill. You started out your presentation talking about the savings rate, which it's collapsed ever since COVID started. And we're seeing the economy come out of COVID, going more into services. And a lot of these stocks, like the mattress stock, you mentioned RH, they've all collapsed. So I think there has to be some amount of demand destruction going on out there. And domestic trucking has even come off a bit. So perhaps.
No, I think you're spot on. No, that's the big question mark. You mentioned, restoration hardware, et cetera, but that's the savings rate went to 33 from 7, and it's going to go back to 7, but you still have that lump of additional savings that out there that could be spent. But if you look at, and you folks know the GDP was down 1.4 in Q1, although in Q1 spending was up 2.7. So it's a lot of mixed signals. But I think it's where you're coming from is I think it has to come back down. What happened to the spending slope? The slope of the U.S. consumer spending line was like this pre-COVID over many, many years, except for, the Great Recession and stuff. And at COVID, it went like this. It's going to come back to this. It's only a question of when. I think it's going to happen fairly quickly, but there are a lot of conflicting kinds of data out there about when it's going to come back down. And also that split 70-30, it's also started to revert back to 70-30. And all of those things, inflation, the reversion, reverting back to the 70-30, all of those things are going to drive inflation. All the rest of it is going to drive demand down, which will drive volume down, which is part of my forecasting about things getting better toward the end of the year. Next 2, 3, 4 months are going to be getting somewhat worse, but I think then it'll get better because I think the kind of things you mentioned about spending coming back down is absolutely going to happen. And all the free money from the government is stopping as well. So I think all those things will lead to a reduction in demand, reduction in cargo volume.
Yeah, it's spending, but it's what they're spending on, and it's going to be moving to services as a.
Yeah, by the way, I've been flying the last couple of weeks more than I have in 2 years. Airports are absolutely mobbed. Fort Lauderdale, I was in Charlotte, I was in Newark. It's shoulder to shoulder in the airports, which tells you something about what people are spending their money on.
Okay, so we have time for one more question and comment.
Thanks so much, Bob. Hi, everybody. It's been a while since I've seen you, and it's so nice to see some friends in the audience and on the panel. So I'm Tiffany Compress, and one of the things I just wanted to point out to everybody is, I came in a little late this morning, so I don't know if it was mentioned, but demurrage and detention, issues with chassis, issues with product getting in so late that it's not good quality anymore. I've been seeing, I'm an attorney, like Jen, I don't deal in the same area that she does. I deal with the litigation side in international food. And that's one of the reasons that we've sponsored, I'm Fisher Broyles, we sponsored the bag. But I did want to bring to your attention that there are things that you can do about it. And there are actions that you can take. There is a statute of limitations. And depending on what kind of claim you want to bring, I have clients, we have clients that have lost an entire stream of business because their product couldn't get to the destination port in time. And the big retailers that they were working with said, you know what, obviously you guys can't meet our requirements. So, they lost millions of dollars in profits because of these delays and these issues. And so we're seeing this across the board in many, many ports, product coming from many countries, different kinds of product. So if that's something that, that you've been considering that you've been facing. We're happy to talk to you about it, to give you guidance and make some recommendations for you.
Thank you so much, Val.
Thank you.
Okay, so it's my pleasure to do the first of a continuation of something that members have told us that they like a lot. So it's a quick snapshot from various countries about opportunities for suppliers in those countries in terms of business partners with you. So we're happy to kick it off this morning with information from Portugal. And so it's our pleasure to welcome João Modo Pinto, the Commissioner of the Portuguese Trade and Investment Agency. And AFI has worked with this particular agency on a number of things over the years. So it's wonderful to have him here with us this morning, and we'll turn things over to João.
Thank you very much. So good morning, everyone. I'm with the Portuguese Embassy. I'm the Portuguese Trade Commissioner for the US. And basically, I'm the guy preventing you to go to coffee break, which, by the way, is serving Portuguese coffee. So I promise I'll be very quick. And today I'm going to talk very briefly about the Portuguese offer, about Portuguese products. Oops, and this is popping up. Okay, hopefully. And so basically, I'm here to talk very shortly about the Portuguese offer. But just to explain our role, we are a government agency, right? So we help Portuguese companies to export products all over the world, including the US. But here in the US, we work a lot with US importers, trying to find solutions for their sourcing needs. So if there's any one of you that are looking for new products, new suppliers from Europe, from Portugal, we'll be more than glad to help you out. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about Portugal. But first and foremost, this is the most important slide. You have there a QR code that will land you in a landing page in a website that we have here in the US with the directory of Portuguese producers of food products. And you can just go in, you connect directly to them, because we don't sell you anything. We are just facilitators, but you can consult and see a lot of Portuguese manufacturers of Portuguese food goods. So let's talk a little bit about Portugal. Portugal, as you know, we border Spain and the Atlantic. We are a Mediterranean country, but with a very strong, because we border the Atlantic, with a very strong Atlantic influence. So to talk about products, first and foremost, we have to talk about olive oil and olives, right? So Portugal is the 4th largest exporter in the world of pure olive oil, virgin olive oil. We are the 4th largest exporter. We export a lot of olive oil, but very interesting is that our olive oil has several international awards, even in the US. But very interesting is that because of our climate, by the way, Portugal is considered as being the most Western country in Europe, is considered to be the California of Europe. And because of our special climate, our olives, the climate causes early ripening of the olives. So we are the first country to be able to place olive oil in the markets. Okay, and obviously, like in the wine, we have over 30 different species of olives, indigenous species of olive variety in Portugal. So there are many different kinds of olive oil in Portugal. But it's not only about olive oil, okay? So since we border the Atlantic, it's all about fish, seafood, fish products. And we have a very traditional industry of canned fish products, okay? So we are talking about sardines, tuna, anchovies, octopus, everything you can put inside a can. And this can be packaged in olive oil, which is a premium product, but we can also be put in water, vegetable oil, and other kind of sauces. So we have a very big and traditional canned fish industry in Portugal. But besides canned fish, obviously we have frozen and fresh fish, and we export a lot, including the US. So ready meals and frozen fish. And when you're talking about seafood, you're talking, okay, sardines, tuna, sea bass, and octopus, squid, oysters, mussels, everything that we produce in Portugal and we export all over the world. So besides fish and fresh fish, then because of the climate, we also export a lot of fresh and frozen fruits. Okay, and again, being very similar, having very similar climate to California, we are able to export very high quality products that are distinctive of the Mediterranean diet. So here we are talking about a lot of fruits such as blueberries, raspberries, strawberries, apples, pears, oranges, kiwis, bananas, pineapples, chestnuts, almonds. We have huge US investments producing almonds in Portugal. So all these kind of fruits we are able to export to the US. And one of them in the vegetable side is tomatoes. So Portugal is the 5th largest exporter of tomatoes in the world. People don't know do this. We export a lot of tomato. 95% of tomato concentrated in Portugal is exported. It's a huge industry. So for markets like in the US that you love to put your tomato in the pizza sauce, so we export a lot of tomato as well. Other products that we export from Portugal, very high quality. And by the way, some of these products are gourmet products, so they are not necessarily mass produced, but this is for a more gourmet clientele. So one of our best kept secrets are our cheeses, okay, from cow, goat, sheep milk, etc. Many of them with international awards worldwide, and very traditional and very high quality cheeses coming out of Portugal. But Portugal also have a very sweet tooth, right? So we do a lot of desserts and we export a lot of desserts. And by the way, this is a spoiler alert. Tonight's dessert is going to be one of the most well-known Portugal's dessert, the pastel de nata. It's an egg custard cake. The dessert tonight is going to be, it was sponsored by Nata Pura, Portuguese company that exports and that manufactures these pastéis de nata. And this is a sweet that was developed over 300 years ago in a monastery in Portugal by the monks. So these are recipes, century-old recipes. And most of these cakes, of course, it has an abundance of eggs, honey, sugar. And you'll be able to experiment these desserts tonight. Other products coming out of Portugal that we also export, jam, jellies, marmalades, honey, waters, juices, fresh juices. Actually, this company is so natural. They have a factory already in the US, in Pennsylvania. So there are stores here in the US selling this kind of juices and natural juices. So this is other line of products that we export a lot. And of course, once again, coffee. Sikal is the company that you are drinking the coffee during your coffee breaks. But then we have hot sauces, spices, and some high gourmet products. So for example, those 2 bottles there of vinegar, this is vinegar made out of port wine that you don't find anywhere else in the world, but in Portugal, right? So vinegar made out of the port wine, and of course salt. We export a lot of salt, but gourmet salt is the first layer of those salt when they dry it. So very, very, very high quality. So basically, most of these are gourmet products, very high end. And once again, this is our information. The QR code again. That's your most important slide. This is what you need to get, and we are available to answer any questions. We'll be here throughout the day So hopefully, if you don't buy products from Portugal, you should take a look. Very high-end products, and I'll leave it here. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, John. Okay, well, as was mentioned, we're up for a break with some Portuguese coffee and some other delicious things. Thank you, Shriver Fruits, for sponsoring a break. And we'll come back in 15. And we're going to be forceful about that because we want to keep as close to schedule as possible. So enjoy the break.
is the case, somebody, I will have to use the mouse, so maybe here. So that I move it, because when he speaks, I cannot stand around him. So sit here and then I think I should be able to use this sitting here. Also. And use it later. Put this. You can just copy it onto the screen. It will be easier. Yeah.
Yes. So got to your job.
Okay, we're going to get started again, folks. If I could ask the people who are in the room already to do me a huge favor and really boost my ego, start clapping as if I just said something intelligent. Okay. All right, I got some people looking on that one. Come on in, folks. Okay. Okay, so a little din out in the hallway, please come inside. We are ready to get rolling again. Just a housekeeping detail while the rest of the group files back in. If you are interested in and have, you just have to let Erin know if you're interested in the port tour. It's a limited number. There may not be space anymore. But if you are, what we're going to do is meet at the front desk where you checked in, and then we'll arrange Ubers, or if somebody has a car and is driving, we'll get folks there. So meet there at about 2:10 because it's only a couple-minute ride, and that starts at 2:30. But if Erin doesn't have you on the list, then you won't be able to get in. So. That is, yeah. All right, so in the interest of keeping us on schedule as possible, I'm going to introduce our next speaker. So if I say the words free dues, is that going to help get the room quieter? And people didn't even hear it. Okay, we are going to get started here again. It's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker. Bob Savage is an expert in HACCP training. He's more than 50 years experience in the food industry. He's worked for FDA and with USDA, and now he's a senior vice president at the HACCP Consulting Group. He's taught numerous HACCP, sanitation, standard operating procedures, good manufacturing practices, and HACCP audit courses for the food industry in the US and internationally. He's here today to tell us about the importance and best methods for conducting a hazard analysis for your FSVP, which you heard earlier. Not all importers are doing a good job of that. So it's great that we have Bob here with us to give some guidance on that. So Bob, welcome.
see if I can get this. Okay, thank you, Bob, and good morning, everyone. And it's real nice to be here. Certainly, I'm probably not known to most all of you, fairly new to the association, but real glad to be here, to be in Fort Lauderdale. Okay, thanks. And being here in Fort Lauderdale, beautiful, beautiful city. I live in Fairfax, Virginia, so I flew down yesterday, and the temperature was 35 degrees. So coming to Fort Lauderdale was a real pleasure. I'd like to talk about hazard analysis. How many, just out of curiosity, it was touched on a minute ago, how many have had Bob's foreign supplier verification training? Excellent. How about the FDA preventive controls training? Okay, very good, very good. So some of the stuff I'm going to be talking about, you're going to be familiar with. And regarding the FSCP program, certainly the heart of that program is the hazard analysis, as is the hazard analysis for everything dealing with food safety. You look back, USDA, the Food Safety Inspection Service, have HACCP regulations for meat, poultry, egg products, siluriforms or catfish industries. FDA has HACCP regulations for juice drinks, for seafood, certainly. And of course, now with their preventive controls program, that also has hazard analysis as the basis for determining what hazards we're dealing with in the industry. When I was developing the materials for the training program, or for this course, came across some real interesting data just to share with you, to give an overview, and Jennifer talked about some of this earlier perhaps. This is a publication from the USDA Economic Research Service. And what the agency did here, a service, was to look at import violations from 2002 to 2019, and where things were rejected for only pathogens. And by the way, I always feel guilty talking about pathogens and all these harmful bacteria just before lunch. Sometimes it makes people a little skittish, but this is a total of 22,350 refusals or violations of imported product. And you can kind of see how that's broken out for fisheries and seafood products, and spices and flavors and cheese, fruits and fruit products, and so on down the list. It's interesting to note that fisheries and seafood products, FDA seafood HACCP regulations were promulgated way back in about 1995, I believe. And they also had a requirement in there that importers of seafood had to have certain food safety information on file from their suppliers, but yet we're still seeing a lot of violations, and we'll look at the breakout of that in the next slide here. During this period of time, salmonella was the most prevalent reason for rejecting a lot or shipment. Listeria, you may not be familiar with some of these pathogens. Listeria, while the incidence is pretty low, the fatality rate associated with listeria is about 20%. So very important. The other thing about listeria, in other countries, there's different tolerances for listeria. In the US, FDA and USDA both have a zero tolerance. You cannot have listeria in any what we call ready-to-eat products, and we'll talk about that later. Histamine was certainly associated with seafood, aflatoxin associated with grains, and a whole host of other lesser bacteria. In the Economic Research Service, looking at the data, Salmonella violations increased from 63% from the previous survey to 79.8% in their most recent survey. Listeria luckily has been declining, which is real good. And by the way, these pathogens, these harmful bacteria are prevalent here in the US as well. Certainly you're familiar with salmonella in poultry in particular. Listeria would are ready to eat products. So it's not unique to imported products for sure. But I'll show later how this impacts on a particular example where a company got a warning letter from FDA associated with Listeria. Most of the refusals, like I mentioned, deal with fishery and seafood products, followed by spices and flavors and salts, cheese products, and so on. The countries associated with these rejections, India is 22.9%, Mexico, Vietnam, Indonesia, and France particularly with cheeses, primarily because they use unpasteurized milk. They use raw milk to produce the cheeses. So, this information, by the way, of course, is also available to FDA. So if you're FDA, where would you put your resources to look at imported products? So this is pretty significant. All of this information, by the way, is based on about 1 to 2% of physical examinations of product by FDA to ports of entry. Only 1 to 2%. Obviously, with some of the data that Jennifer shared earlier, there's absolutely no way FDA can really do an adequate job in looking at imported products. Having a background in USDA, the Food Safety Inspection Service that regulates the meat and poultry industry and imports, they have an entirely different approach to how they deal with imports. Don't have much time to get into that, but essentially FSIS, the Food Safety Inspection Service, requires a country interested in exporting these commodities to be equivalent to the FSIS inspection program. So a country has to go through a fairly extensive process to become eligible to export to the US. They have to respond to what's called a questionnaire that describes their whole inspection program, their regulations, the government laboratories, and so on. If this is acceptable to FSIS, then they audit the country to make sure that what they have said on paper that actually functions in the country. And once that's acceptable, that gives the foreign government inspection program in the country to certify companies as being equivalent and eligible to export to the US. And then at the ports of entry, USDA or FSIS inspects every lot of meat, poultry, egg products, and siluriforms or catfish that come into the US. So whole different system than what FSI or FDA has dealt with. Now, just to go back and look at some of the language in the FSVP regulation dealing with hazard analysis, I picked out a few of the statements dealing with the hazard analysis, which I think is very important. This first section under 1.502 says you, the importer, must develop, maintain, and follow FSVP that provides adequate assurance that your foreign supplier is producing a food in compliance with the processes and procedures that provide at least the same level of public health protection as those required under 418, which is the preventive control regulation, or 419 for the produce safety regulations. So that's very, very significant. It doesn't say it has to be equal to, but it has to have the same level of protection. So to me, that's a real key to for you as the importer to develop an adequate foreign supplier verification program, is to get that type of information from your suppliers. It says you must conduct a hazard analysis to identify and evaluate based on experience, illness data, scientific reports, and so on, that are known or reasonably foreseeable hazards for each type of food you import, determine whether there are any hazards requiring a control. That's a challenge. That is definitely a challenge of the importer to determine what you're importing. For the hazards, it's typical for all the food safety programs that we have to deal with potential biological hazards, chemical hazards, and physical hazards that occur naturally, hazards that may be unintentionally introduced or maybe intentionally introduced for economic gains. And that latter one, certainly you're probably familiar with melamine in pet food that caused a huge problem years and years ago. I understand there was a problem some years ago with saffron, with walnut shells and saffron. So, you know, there are some intentionally introduced issues for economic gains. It says that the hazard evaluation must assess the probability that the hazard will occur in the absence of its control and the severity of the illness or injury if the hazards were to occur. Must consider the evaluation of environmental pathogens whenever a ready-to-eat product is exposed to the environment before packaging. And that certainly deals again back with Listeria. Listeria monocytogenes is the pathogen of concern. And as I mentioned, like in the European Union, they have 100 per gram tolerance for Listeria. In the US, again, for both FDA and USDA, it's a 0 tolerance. So you need to be aware of that. We've done a lot of work in Europe, done a lot of work in France, and they readily admit, well, yeah, we got Listeria. And we generally just tell them, well, that's okay, but don't plan on shipping anything to the US because it's going to be inspected. Again, more language out of the regulation that suggests things that you might consider. I don't know quite how you get all this information. Some companies have it, other companies don't. And I was interested to hear some comments earlier that a lot of the importers still are not familiar with the FSVP regulations. And it's fascinating after all these years. And what I'm seeing, I try to pay attention to all the warning letters that are posted on the FDA website. It seems to me currently they're looking to make sure at least all the products are being covered that you're importing. It doesn't appear to me, and I may be wrong, that they're really digging into the adequacy of the FSVP program that you'd have on file. So, and again, I'll show you at the conclusion here, a couple examples where they have done that. They've looked at the adequacy of the hazard analysis in particular. But they suggest other things, design and establishment, raw materials and ingredients going into the products that you're importing, transportation practices, particularly manufacturing practices and packaging procedures would be very important, storage and distribution, and so on. A lot of things you need to take into consideration in doing the hazard analysis to comply with the FSVP regulations. So in developing some documentation that may be needed for you to complete this, obviously product label, and obviously company's HACCP plan or preventive controls program. If you get a HACCP plan, certainly the hazard analysis, a process flow diagram, which needs to correlate with the hazard analysis, and any critical control points that would be identified, along with monitoring procedures and corrective actions, verification procedures and records. And then if you're dealing with a FDA preventive controls program, certainly process preventive controls, which is pretty much equivalent to HACCP, as well as allergen control program, sanitation control program, and supplier verification preventive controls program. If you're able to get that as an importer to help develop your FSVP program, you're in good shape. Our experience has been that we get calls from importers that, quite honestly don't have a clue about the regulation, and let alone being able to get what's necessary from their foreign supplier. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done. But certainly, hopefully things will improve. Again, more information that you could obtain from your foreign supplier if it's available, third-party audit reports, perhaps, any local government inspection reports, any previous FDA audits of companies that export to the US. They will always issue what's called an FD 43, which lists observations that they made as part of the audit that would be important for you to know. Letters of guarantee that the foreign supplier has pertaining to ingredients that they use, perhaps, and compliance with good manufacturing practices. That's, pest control, water quality, sanitation, etc. Now, the typical potential hazards that are of importance, and again, these are same as we deal with in the US, same as HACCP deals with in the US, the same as the FDA's preventive controls regulation deal with. We're concerned about Salmonella, Listeria, E. coli 0157H7, Clostridium perhaps, parasites with produce coming in from various countries, and viruses. On the chemical side, certainly pesticides, herbicides, insecticides, packaging materials, food allergies, very, very important. I specifically underline that because 30% of FDA recalls are due to allergen issues. So certainly from a importing standpoint, to make sure that your foreign supplier adequately addresses and deals with allergens is very, very important. Radiological issues, natural toxins, and so on. Physical hazards, certainly metal, glass, stones, hard plastic, all of those things need to be evaluated as to how your foreign supplier addresses those in their hazard analysis. Do they have metal detectors, for example, for identifying metal shavings and products? Some companies, at least in the US, are moving into having both metal detectors and X-ray systems. So the metal detectors obviously picking up metal. X-ray systems are looking for hard plastic and other foreign material that may be in the product. Other considerations, this comes out of what's called the National Advisory Committee on the Microbiological Criteria for Foods. They, back in 1997, issued a HACCP paper that contained the 7 HACCP principles. And I kind of look at that document as the Bible of HACCP. And they have an extensive appendix dealing with hazard analysis and what to look for and what to consider. So you might want to consider getting a copy of that. You can easily Google that paper. They obviously deal with ingredients, any intrinsic factors of the product itself, such as the acidity, perhaps the water activity or availability of water for bacteria to grow. There's some folks here, I believe from Poland, that make freeze-dried products. And obviously those are very, very, very low water activity that inhibits, any of the pathogens we're concerned about. Procedures used in processing, microbial content of the food, facility design. Some of these, are kind of regurgitated in the FSCP regulation. So they did go back perhaps and look into those areas too. Equipment design and use. Again, these are very difficult for you as an importer to determine if you can't get it adequately from your foreign supplier. Packaging, sanitation, conditions of storage, all may need to be considered when you're doing a hazard analysis. For those of you who have taken the FDA, what we call the PCQI training, Preventive Controls Qualified Individual Training Program, this is a form that they use to capture information for the hazard analysis portion of that. They're very clear in saying, this is only a recommendation for a form. You can do whatever you care to put together. However, we kind of subscribe to the fact if these are the forms used in the training, these are the forms FDA is most aware of, and you can use other forms to capture the relevant information, but then you got to spend time explaining it to an FDA investigator, and that sometimes may not be the easiest thing to do in the world. Again, this form is used to correlate with the process flow diagram. So the first column, ingredient to process step, is carried over from the process flow diagram that describes how the product is being made. And then identify the potential food safety hazards. Of course, the B, C, and P are biological, chemical, and physical hazards. Do any potential food safety hazards require preventive control? Yes or no? Then column 4, you have to justify your decision. And that within the hazard analysis is by far the weakest part of the hazard analysis of how companies justify their decisions. And then, of course, identify, if you say yes, you justify your decision, then you identify what preventive controls apply and whether it's applied at the step you're looking at or further down into the process. If you say no, you justify your decision. The hazard's not reasonably likely to occur, and you're done with it. I don't know, those in the back of the room might not be able to see this, but just as an example, this is with peppercorns, and they're receiving shelf-stable peppercorns, and the biological hazards are vegetative bacteria like Salmonella and pathogenic E. coli. Pesticides were potential chemical hazards and foreign material. They say yes for the biological hazards, yes for the pesticides, and their justification is Salmonella and pathogenic E. coli recalls and outbreak history with peppercorns. And they're using a process control, preventive control program to deal with that downstream in the process. For pesticides, it's an imported product. And here they're using and relying on the supply chain verification program. They said no for foreign material, but I think later on we'll see that they actually do have a metal detector downstream in their process. Jumping ahead for pathogen destruction at that step where they're controlling the Salmonella and E. coli. They again use the same justification, and here they have a process control preventive measure for heat treatment and so on. We won't go through the whole thing. Now, if you're relying on your foreign suppliers' HACCP information or preventive controls information and that's been adequately developed, you can use this form to kind of extract the important information from their materials to satisfy the FSVP requirements. And looking at an example here, this is for chicken beef bouillon from the foreign suppliers' information. They identified lethality in a cooking step to deal with salmonella, and they have a validated cooking time and temperature. They also identified cooling of that cooked product to prevent the outgrowth of what we call some spore forming bacteria. That they also identified that as part of the process preventive control measures. And then they also identified the metal detector as a preventive control measure. So this is a very good approach to dealing with setting up the requirements in the FSVP regulation. There are a lot of resources available in helping the industry, importers to make sure the FSVP programs have been adequately developed. Certainly the FDA reportable food registry is important. The second one here is extremely important. The draft compliance for industry, the hazard analysis risk-based preventive controls, they deal with that like the Bible. If your hazard analysis doesn't address what's identified for different commodities that are identified in this hazard guide, you probably have some explaining to do. So be very, very careful of that. CDC certainly may have some information. Obviously, the FDA import alerts, FDA recalls. This third one, the FDA import refusal report. That's kind of interesting. You can search by country to see what commodities have been refused entry from a country, or you can go the reverse of that, look at a specific commodity and identify where it might have been rejected. The FDA's bad bug book, I always like that title, makes it pretty clear. Other resources, chemical, metals, natural toxins, pesticide guidance document, radionuclides on imported foods, action levels for poisonous or deleterious substances. All of those are references to help you develop a more thorough hazard analysis, or one that's been developed by your foreign supplier. Now, to sum up, I made reference to a couple warning letters. Both of these are fairly recent. This is FDA inspection of an importer due to a recall of imported mushrooms because of Listeria monocytogenes. And the reason they went back to the importer was the fact that the mushrooms caused an illness outbreak. So if any imported product is associated with an illness outbreak, you can almost guarantee you're going to get a visit by an FDA investigator. So when FDA came back in and looked at the importers FSVP program, they identified fact that the hazard analysis had not been done correctly. Hazard analysis did not identify Listeria monocytogenes as a potential hazard that needed to be controlled for that process or that product. Again, it said that within the warning letter, it said the FSVP did not identify Listeria monocytogenes as a biological hazard in need of control. So that was one of the first incidents, and I probably admit I don't review all the warning letters, but as I mentioned earlier, predominantly I see warning letters associated with the FSVP program not capturing all of the products that are being imported. There's some products being missed and not addressed in the FSVP program. This is one of the first I've seen that kind of zeroed more into the adequacy of the hazard analysis. And then the second example was kind of interesting as well. This is a hazard analysis the firm provided. This is the importing company provided, which states that they did not have any potential biological, chemical, or physical hazards in the product that they were importing. Well, looking further into the FSVP program, they identified critical control points for controlling biological, chemical, or physical hazards. But in the hazard analysis, they said they didn't have any. So FDA kind of questioned that and said, well, you know, how did this come about? And as it turned out, the foreign establishment or foreign company had what they considered a qualified individual do their hazard analysis for them. And so FDA questioned the adequacy of the qualified individual to do the hazard analysis. So, you know, again, that kind of related back to the hazard analysis. So like I said, I would predict that down the road, when FDA, you know, comes back to revisit importers, they're not going to be so focused on whether the FSVP program covered all the products. They're going to look more in detail on other aspects of the program. That's just kind of typical. And as I think Jennifer mentioned, they're going to be going out doing these now on site rather than just virtual. So they'll have more of an opportunity to look at things a little closer. Let me finish by just echoing something that Bob mentioned in one of his past newsletters that I thought was extremely appropriate. You need to keep up with this. You need to be aware of what all's going on around you, particularly obviously with imported products. What is FDA doing? What are they finding? What are the recent recalls? Anything associated with a imported product? There's an easy way of trying to keep up with these because most all of those websites I mentioned, you can link. So if you're lonely for emails, as I say, you can get buried in emails. You know, and it's not, you know, I get them all, but you know, I peruse them. I for sure don't read every one of them. I couldn't stay awake that long. But it's very, very important that you keep up, and that's what Bob was emphasizing in one of his previous newsletters. So with that, let me see if there's some questions. I see a gentleman over here. You have another. Oh.
Thank you, Bob. That was a great presentation for for this group, although I think that it's so in depth. I'm with certified laboratories, and we have 1,000 scientists, all of who would have understood this. I don't know if anybody in this room understood it. The HACCP control understanding is tough for the importer and most importers. I visit a lot of importers, and they have HACCP plans, but they're counting on the foreign supplier to really give the information to them that's proper. And I don't think, according to what you're saying, that's effective enough. How is it that an importer, without a science background, going to be able to know for sure that what is being supplied them by the foreign supplier is adequate for SFVP?
That's a perfect question. I don't know if I have an answer. You know, it's very, very difficult, you know, to me, for an importer to comprehend all of this, because, you know, admittedly, you're not technically oriented, or at least most of you aren't. And, you know, it gets very complicated. So even if a foreign supplier provides you with something, you know, how do you evaluate it as being adequate to satisfy what's required by the regulation? Very, very difficult. That's why I mentioned earlier, you know, having a background in FDA as well as USDA, I more strongly subscribe to the USDA's approach to dealing with imported product than FDA's. You know, and you know, they're dealing with a smaller audience for sure. On the FSIS side, there's about 35 countries that are eligible to export that have gone through this equivalence process, which is by the regulations, by the way. Whereas on the FDA side, there's 135 countries or something of that nature. They couldn't possibly do that, although the Food Safety Modernization Act did give FDA the authority to work with countries to voluntarily assess the adequacy of their food safety system. So they've done that with Australia, New Zealand, Canada, and I think working with the EU now, that alleviates some of these issues with imported product.
Right. And I just want to make one other point that just came across the wire, because I subscribe to all this FDA information too, and I think you're right, there's a lot, is that it's very, now they're going to be looking very closely at foreign supplier factories. So you can't just say that you have a registered supplier. They want to know which factory it's coming from, and that factory has to be registered individually. I deal a lot with seafood and spices, and just because one of their factories is registered, I've had recalls or FDA detention stops from one factory out of 3 because they had a salmonella problem in one particular factory. So you have to make sure that whoever you're buying from, it has all of their facilities registered. And that's all.
Good point. And, you know, I think as Bob mentioned, the last comment, but as Bob mentioned, you know, we've done a lot of work overseas. Again, a lot more in the meat and poultry industry, to be honest. And some of these companies are extremely good. The perception that imported product is inferior, at least in the meat and poultry side, is a misnomer. My favorite example is a company we worked with, had 6,000 employees, and they exported to over 100 countries, and they had a staff on site dealing with auditors that would come in and review their procedures and programs and such, just to handle the auditors. Either the foreign government inspection people would come in, or their customers would come in. They had 3 people just to deal with auditors. So, you know, you have to figure they're in pretty good shape to comply with all of that scrutiny. So
maybe. Thank you, Bob.
Just one.
Exactly to that point, what Dean just said, there's a foreign supplier and FSVP, and we found a nice solution in Ivory Coast, and having our QI, qualified individual from the United States, right? So with US credential based on US stuff, although it's from Ivory Coast, but it's the it's basically the same standard.
Yeah.
We prove them by the same standard.
Yeah, that's very good. That's a great approach.
Thank you.
Great approach. Okay. Thank you very much. All right. Thanks very much, Bob. And obviously Bob's still here, so if you have questions to follow up, feel free. And if we had more time, I could throw some more comments in on some of the points that were just raised, but good way to get it. If you haven't taken the FSVP course already, go ahead. So it's our pleasure to move on to the next country presentation, another longtime partner of AFI. And AFI members themselves. In fact, I know somebody's father in this room, I think, has been to India about 35, 40 times, something like that. So, but it's my pleasure to welcome Sri Nath Sharma, the Honorable Minister for Agriculture Development and Government of Sikkim in India. And please join us at the podium. Thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I consider the invitation to speak here at the Association of Food Industry Convention today a rare honor and a privilege. Addressing this august assembly is both a matter of honor and of humility to me. I feel honored because I am associated with an achievement that has brought Sikkim to the limelight in the national and international area in the field of organic farming. Today, it is a matter of great pride for us that Sikkim, with more than 76,000 hectares of certified organic farmland, is the first completely organic farming state in the country and perhaps in the world. Sikkim is the 22nd state of India, nestled in the Himalayas amidst China, Bhutan, and Nepal, having only 7,096 square kilometers. With its abundant natural resources, it falls in the Himalayan mega biodiversity hotspot, one of the four in India. Nature is bountiful in gifting Sikkim with great landscape, forests, streams, rivers, glaciers, lakes, snow-capped mountains, and cool deserts. The biodiversity of the state includes more than 4,500 species of flowering plants, more than 50 species of fish, 690 species of butterflies, 16 species of amphibians, 70 species of reptiles, 550 species of birds, and 154 species of mammals. All these beautiful gifts are wrapped in different flavors of indigenous social practices, exotic cultures, and rich tradition. Hence, the state is also unique as destination on the tourism canvas of the world. We have gathered here to provide delegates with the tangible information on organic food, to hold meaningful engagement with the food industry, and to provide a platform for discussion with the industry to enable challenges and success stories to be shared. Organic food has been one of the fastest growing sector of food industry as a legitimate alternative to conventional food. Organic food can be defined as the product of farming system which avoids the use of synthetic fertilizers, pesticides, growth promoters, and additives. There is a growing market for organic food, even though its price is usually higher than that of conventional food. The reason for such large demand of organic food lie in its benefits. Many research studies regard organic food as the healthy food because it contains low pesticide residue. Many consumers find organic food more nutritious and better tasting than traditional food. Also, the positive environmental impact of organic farming appeals to green eaters who consider organic food environmentally friendly. Besides its low pesticides containments and higher nutrition, The merits of organic food includes its sustainability and positive environmental impacts. The benefits of organic farming to the wider environment have been studied, and the major advantages are biodiversity, high soil quality, and low energy output. The agriculture sector is a priority sector, and our government is of the view that the very concept of commercialization of agricultural production is required to be disseminated, and agricultural production should be posed as income generating and noble profession. The reason why I say this is because Sikkim is home to small and marginal farmers with an average land holding of about 1.0 hectare. In terms of production, it is these farmers that make the largest contributions. These are mainly for consumptive use, and in many places, marketing activities is still rooted in older and local methods. Farmers are engaged mostly in the production of low-value subsistence crops. Hence, our focus has now shifted to high-value agricultural commodities that have better prospect in the organic market. We are in the process of development of certified organic production in a value chain mode to link growers with consumers and to support the development of entire value chain. Currently, we are taking into consideration some of the high-value crops such as buckwheat, large cardamom, ginger, turmeric, Sikkim mandarin, other fruits and vegetables for value chain developments by organizing the crop growing areas into clusters and through promotion of farmers, producer organization, FPO. Another important area which needs the reforms intervention in the development of robust supply chain for the transporting the organic produce from the state to the markets across the country and the world. Our government has assured commitment by scaling up the intervention required for stimulating this sector. Our farmers need support for entitlement to scientific knowledge, for equitable access to resource and financial services, for investment in the processing and marketing infrastructure, and all those in the participatory mode. What is required is a grand alliance of people's organizations, private enterprises, governments, and other organizations. We all know that Sikkim is a completely organic farming state. We would like to position Sikkim as the organic food factory to the world. This event has brought together all the industry members and potential investors under one roof that this definitely feel would lead to the unveiling of opportunities for the growth of the organic industry in Sikkim. I also encourage everyone here to utilize this platform to forge long-lasting business relationship, not only with our farmers and farmers producer organizations and stakeholders of not only for the development of the agricultural sector, but also sectors like health, education, infrastructure development, and tourism. The concern is not just to produce and distribute more food, but to do this in a sustainable manner and to guarantee the access of present and future generations to a wholesome and nutritious food. I thank the organizers for giving us the opportunity to present our case, and I wish everyone a fruitful and successful outcome at the end of the event. Thank you.
Anybody have any questions for that? Okay, if not, then we'll continue on. But thank you so much for your information, and I know we'll be following up going forward. So housekeeping, a couple details before bring up our last speaker of the morning. The processed food section meeting will take at the conclusion of next presentation. What we'll do is, if you're not sticking around for that meeting, we'll ask you to leave so we can get that meeting started right away. So, and then again, if you're looking to do the Port Everglades tour, he snuck out without answering our questions, so we're getting the logistics. But for right now, the best plan of attack, you have to make sure Aaron knows you're on there so we know if there's room for you. And then the group who is going to meet at the front desk essentially around 2:30. And then we'll figure out transportation, Ubers or people have cars, that sort of thing. You want to meet all the way downstairs? Okay, all right. So I'm staying corrected. You have to meet downstairs. Okay. Yeah. Doing the jump drive while I'm doing this, I'll try to do two things at once here. Get that thing going. Get the next speaker. Sure, it's a pleasure personally and via AFI to welcome our next speaker back. Some of you are going to say this guy looks familiar, and somebody mentioned to me a little earlier on about the reception we had in Miami Beach a few years ago and the excellent food that was added. And it's because of this gentleman here. So we're definitely in for a real treat. And so Chef John Noble Massey is a friend of AFI, he's a professor at Florida International University, as well as a culinary industry consultant and trained chef. He's been asked to create some culinary treats featuring AFI member provided ingredients. One second here. Late addition to the list here. Actually on the other thumb drive, so we'll continue going on. So chef's going to use cashews provided by program sponsor Ira Cash, as well as pistachios from Seton International, Seton Farms International, raisins and banana chips from Sunrise Commodities, macadamia nuts from J.F. Braun and Sons, honey by Luminous Foods, and pumpkin seeds from Anchor Ingredients. So we thank these members for their generous contributions to what is sure to be a delicious session. The mic isn't working here. All right, let's see. Yeah. All right, well, I might call up the other mic again shortly. This is probably a case then when the people on Zoom can hear better than the people in the room. So.
Closer to that mic, Bob.
Okay. Is that better? All right. How about that? One more second here. Well, I'm going to have the chef start speaking to you, and then I am going to re-get the presentation, and actually we're going to look, we'll put it right in and go.
I'm sorry to pull it up. Okay. I will work. Okay.
How's everybody doing? Good morning, everybody. Wow. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Aaron. Thank you, Bob, for inviting me back. I must have done something right at the last event 3 years ago. So hopefully everyone is hungry. We did prepare some really delicious treats for you, both sweet and savory. I want to thank our sponsors. I do have a slide thanking our sponsors, but all wonderful products to work with. I also want to recognize one of my students in the back, Rowan Jacobs, who was awesome enough to help me prepare the sweets and treats that you're going to be enjoying momentarily. I was asked by Aaron to come to you and figure out and hopefully inspire you with some end use ideas for your products, dried fruits and nuts primarily. When I talk with anybody about inspiration, it's a two-way street. I always talk about sharing and generating ideas, and I always get great ideas from students like Rowan at the school, and also in all of my consulting. So hopefully in this very brief period of time that we've got between now and lunch, I can generate some ideas, get you to think and share a little bit about what we're doing. There's plenty of reasons to be inspired by the great products that you all have. The first is the nutritional benefits that you see in everything. I have some wonderful slides that show that the nutritional benefits from dried fruits and nuts is very significant here in the States. And we've had wonderful trends for peoples and consumers looking for more healthful products. And you are the companies that can deliver those. And the two products that we're serving today are super healthy, right? We decided to make a trail mix from your vendor products, the cashews, macadamias, pistachios, which were delicious. The raisins supplied by Anchor. Oh, thank you. Oh, there we go. Look at that. Okay, look, thank you so much, Bob. All right, there we go. And the clicker's right here. That's it. So all of these wonderful products were just a pleasure to work with. We also made my own style of Nutella-inspired nut butter. How many of you what do you think the number one and number two ingredient are in traditional Nutella? Sugar and palm oil, right? Right. So you'll see that other my poor joke, right? This is even funnier, I think. Right. See, so I know you've been talking a lot this morning about safety protocols and those kind of things and importing licenses. I try to bring a different kind of energy. We spoke a little bit about nutrition. I'm going to try and do this really quickly so we can get to some of the ideation sections. But baby boomers in particular are looking for less processed foods, more sustainable, more organic, fresh foods, healthier foods. Plenty of benefits to both raw and dry roasted nuts. You'll see that good for heart health, weight loss, particularly when consumed in variety and moderation. And I'll make sure that Aaron shares this slide deck with you all so that you have it as a resource, because I'm going to go through things pretty quickly today. One of the things that when I was talking with one of your member companies from Luminous Foods, and they sent me a wonderful, nice note and talked with the partnerships that he has with local universities and colleges. That is the entry point for lots of foods and trends here in the States. I encourage you all to find not the corporate-run college food services, but the self-operated ones where they have more control over the purchasing. You connect with some of those people, belong to other organizations like NACUFS, the National Association of College and University Food Services, present and donate other products to those types of places. That gets you connected with, you know, who's going to be the ultimate end users of your product in these millennials that are going to college. And the Mediterranean diet is the #1 diet based on the US News and World Report rankings of what is the most healthful. And you see on the bottom of that pyramid up at the top, you know, things that you should be consuming less of, you know, red meats and those kind of things. On the bottom, you'll see nuts and legumes, vegetables and fruits as what we should be consuming the most of. And so those kind of things play really, really well into a great variety of the products that you've had here today. Best ways to consume, I mentioned a couple of these here, variety in diets and making sure that you're dealing in moderation. Some different things that want to encourage you to talk about trends. I mentioned NACUFS. There's lots of reports that I share with students. National Restaurant Association has wonderful reports. Advocacy boards, great. I do a lot of work at the university with, I was talking with the group from Portugal at one of the breaks. I do a lot of work with Spanish Olive Oil Council, the French Butter Board. Connecting with those kind of groups can also be gateways to doing other work. And also, you know, just get out there and try and sample your products, like events like today, and making those connections. I've got a bunch of statistics here on, you know, consumption, whether it's tree nuts, other nuts. That there's significant growth in those categories. Peanut butter being consumed, everything what is going up in terms of peanuts, people actually consuming peanuts, peanuts as ingredients in candies and snacks, but not in other items because of the allergen sensitivities. You see the huge growth in almonds, walnuts, and pistachios in particular. If there's anyone here from Sutton Farms, those were great pistachios to work with as well. And the hazelnuts from, the cashews from Ivory were just beautiful. Thank you. Yes, we appreciate it. And they were delicious. You'll hopefully see, I mean, they're beautifully presented. And I think, and I'm going to have Rowan pass out some of that Nutella style butter. It's used in the Nutella nut butter as well as the trail mix. The trail mix, yes, so thank you for that. The trail mix was flavored with a little Asian 5-spice and turmeric and black pepper. If you've done some research on healthful eating, turmeric, superfood, really helpful for a lot of health issues. And the body increases its absorption of turmeric with a little bit of black pepper. So there's no salt in that. So in the snack mix that Rowan is passing around. We consume more dried fruit now. You know, think about snacks. One thing that COVID did was in forcing people at home, the number of snack occasions has increased significantly. And so whether it's a small packaged snack or eating at home versus going out, you're eating more snacks and more healthful. So let's see. I love showing what retail places of business are doing. So places like Waffle House. Waffle House is one of my favorite retail restaurants to talk about because they've got base items on their menu, and then they add everything else extra at a charge. So their plain waffles is one price, but then if you want peanut waffles, if you want pecan waffles, then that's more. If you want regular hash browns, that's one price. And then you add, you know, if you've been to a Waffle House, I encourage you to try one. Smothered, covered. They had cheese, they had ham, they had diced peppers, onions, everything to it, right? So you see those different kinds of waffles. I love Panera Bread too. They're largely focused on using less processed ingredients. You see dried fruits in their cranberry, walnuts, and bagels, nuts on their salad. Love Seasons 52. You see some of those applications here. So there's plenty of room for applications, both in fast casual, and you also see it in quick service restaurants like Wendy's. They don't serve a lot of these salads, right? But the healthful salads that they do serve is a very vocal component of your population. People want healthful foods. So they do serve that there. How many of you on Instagram? Anyone on Instagram? Oh, a couple of people. Thank you for that. I always put something. Antonio Bouchard is a local awesome pastry chef. And he's got a wonderful pastry shop. Look how beautiful that is. I encourage you to follow. I have no connection to him whatsoever. But he's a great follower and does these really cool desserts inspired with dried fruits and nuts, really cool things, and just beautiful plates. Some other things that are driving trends. I mentioned the snacks. These are all portable packaging for bigger companies. I was talking with another colleague. We're talking about whether or not you go to how to drive your product forward, either business to business, that's the big fish, business to consumer, these smaller locations. I encourage you to try all avenues for your product. You connect with a larger company like Sargento with supplying them with something, you're going to be much more productive. Additional portability here in some of the packaging that you're seeing. Sustainability is huge. I see some of the sustainable packaging outside. We've got the sustainable packaging in our glass containers for the Nutella style butter that we're serving. Organic. One thing that I think that you should also promote in the world of sustainability is the lower carbon footprint of all of your products. You aren't serving beef, chicken, fish, all of those products, it takes a lot more resources, whether it be water, energy, land use. You see it's like 10 or more times the amount of carbon footprint for a meat protein versus a nut protein. And that should be something that you focus on in your marketing and trying to get your product out there. And you see the difference in the food footprints of the different diet types, from a meat lover to a vegan or vegetarian. I teach, so I love meat myself, but the amount of meat that I consume today versus 10 years ago is significantly less. And if we're going to pass the same level of resources on to the next generation, and I have awesome students like Rowan that I want to make sure has a brighter future as we do, then we need to consume less meat proteins as a whole, and make it more special. Special occasions, have a nice steak, a nice piece of fish, but consume your products. Fair trade, also impactful. Students, younger generation, looking for buying companies that they can connect with from their cultural practices and that mirror their own. So doing things fair trade or having those additional certifications, those cost money, but the potentially better results. And then innovation. I love some of the things that Sahel is doing with the different coatings with their different nuts. And these nut butters here, they're putting everything in them and they're coming up with really cool, different flavors, innovative flavors. There's a local ice cream company that does some really wonderful things with their flavors. And you just see almonds and cashews. We're getting away from peanut butter. The growth The growth is in cashews, the growth is in pistachios, the growth is in these other nuts. And nut butters is a great vehicle to do that. I'm also seeing things, we're talking about cashews, cashew creams for a vegan or vegetarian lifestyle, hugely important. And lots of different fruits that you wouldn't normally expect to see dried, whether it's durian, jackfruit, kiwi. You're seeing some innovation in that respect as well. And then, of course, focusing on the nutrition on your packaging. Planters actually does a really nice job of this term nutrition on some of their packaging. So, and focusing on superfoods, those kind of things really help as well. Other ideas for end use, breakfast, and I break them out into different categories. So breakfast bars, at a hotel like this, you know, we have a great display outside. Add some nuts, dried fruits to an oatmeal bar or a cereal bar. Do something with warm compotes made from the product. For lunch and dinner, I mentioned the cashew creams. Pestos are wonderful. You know, I come from an Italian background. We use pesto in lots of our pastas, adding that as a sandwich topping. Salad bars, great use for dried fruits as well. And then dessert, you know, my dad was a baker, so I have a real big connection to anything sweet. So I really hope that you enjoy the nut butter that Rowan's passing around. Lots of different ways to make sure that you're using your product. And I love these chocolate bars, using chocolate and adding nuts to a chocolate bar that a hotel like this uses as an amenity, right? It takes nothing for them to melt some chocolate, add some of your dried toasted nuts to that, and then offer that as an amenity to guests, rather than something that they aren't going to enjoy as much. I love those kind of things. Convenience markets. I used to walk through the mall and smell those cinnamon almonds. I date myself a little bit, but there are connecting with some of those colleges and universities, they love to do these kind of market style approaches. Imagine getting one of your companies getting connected with a college or university and supplying, being their sole provider for a really clean, beautiful setup like this. You see that a lot at Whole Foods. They do a great job of doing that and selling it by the pound. These college and university markets are really in tune with trying to make sure that they're addressing needs of students when they go back to their dorms, that their minds are right for learning, and that starts with having some good nutrition. So that's another reason to reinforce that. So how is that, Aaron? That was the quickest I've ever presented. It's up to you. My final comment. It's up to you. Good ideas, follow through. Hopefully I inspired you with at least one or two things here. If you walk away from this conference with one or two good things, that's awesome. I want to thank the sponsors again. Please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, or that's my consulting website there. I am the lead culinary faculty at Florida International University here in North Miami. We've got students that love to try different products. So if you want, we've done recipe contests for inspiration with some other vendor products. We'd be happy to use any of your products and create something for students like Ron. We've got a coffee. We have got a coffee competition recipe. Right, so that's pretty cool. I mean, I didn't have those opportunities as a student, but we're happy to provide them, and just such an awesome way to reward students that work really hard, that get the most out of everything. And I think that will be my final word today. You're going to get out of everything what you put into it. I say that to students all the time. Students like Ron are getting everything that they can possibly out of school. You're going to get out as much out of this organization as you put into it. So connect with everybody, connect with me, and enjoy your lunch and the rest of your time here. Thank you, Aaron. Thank you, the donors and the sponsors.
Thank you again, Chef. So glad to have you back with us. It's always appreciated. Any questions? We still got some time for, if it's all right. Okay, yeah, Luke.
Yes. What are your ingredients in here? What are the ingredients?
The ingredients. So I shared with you what the ingredients were for Nutella, the sugar and the palm oil. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 ingredients. So delicious ivory cashews, Seton Farms, the pistachios, the JF Braun macadamia nuts, little Greek honey from Lamitas, and one more, chocolate, and dark chocolate from Trader Joe's, 72% cacao. That's it. That's it. Thank you for asking me that. Yeah. And you're welcome to, just eat it with a spoon over lunch. how are the snack mixes? Good. And I talk about sharing ideas. So when Rowan and I were preparing that yesterday, the raisins from Anchor were just so big and beautiful, but they're a little, they come to us dried. And so how do you plump them up? You roast them, and what's that? Raisins from Sunrise. Sorry. Thank you, Aaron. Raisins from Sunrise, and they're big and beautiful. And so we roasted them together and then added the raisins, and they plumped right up. So just delicious. Yes.
No, just to say that thank you very much for mentioning the cashew from Ivory Coast.
From Ivory
Cote d'Ivoire. It's the best, obviously, quality.
It's just delicious.
And I would say so, but when you say that, as a professional, it makes it even more interesting. Thank you
so
for
much.
that. And
Yes.
you use cocoa too. Did you know Cote d'Ivoire is the world's first producer of cocoa?
Thank you
Yes.
for letting me know that. Yes.
All right.
We talk a lot about ingredient specs at the school,
Right.
and their specifications for ingredients dictates the quality of the end product as well as the cost. And so you use the right product, you're going to get a good end result.
product.
So I couldn't be happier and more proud of what I'm serving you today,
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
because you supplied me with a great product.
All right, thank you again, Chef. So a couple quick logistics details. All right, the dinner tonight, unfortunately, although it's going to be nice this afternoon, it looks like, but it is going to rain again apparently tonight. So we are unfortunately going to be inside. It's on the second floor. I think it's called Studio 2 and 3. So that's on the second floor. So we'll see you there at 6. And then we are going to start the process food meeting within hopefully like 2 minutes in here. So please stick around if you are going to stay for the process food meeting. If not, arrivederci. Have a good afternoon, and we'll see you tonight. Yeah, cocktail party and dinner, same place, second floor, Studio 2 and 3.
From Sikkim. Thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure.
And Sujata was also telling to say hi to you. Okay. Finally get credit for those raises. Thank you. He has a higher PRC than we do. We're not.
Bob, did you have my memory stick?